First of all, welcome. Welcome to our first webinar in a quarterly series on the ZEV market and on the updates on our database. We're Solas Energy Consulting. We have offices based out of Canada and the US. And there's a lot of change happening out there, particularly in the electricity and the EV market. And so we wanted to share with you our findings and our research that we've been working on for many months. We've pulled together to provide for you in a very comprehensive way that has a significant amount of depth in it as well. So a little bit about Solas Energy Consulting. So we've been around since 2009. Myself, Paula McGarrigle and Evelyn Carpenter are the co-founders of Solas. And we each have over 20 years of experience. We're a woman-owned enterprise. We've worked primarily in the renewable energy sector, and we've got over 78 gigawatts of experience. We've worked on many interesting projects, everything from wind, solar, biomass, energy storage, EVs, and really enjoyable projects all through Canada, US, and Mexico. We've worked effectively with many of our clients to ensure that projects are delivered on time, on budget. We're really enjoying getting into the smart grid or grid modernization, which includes energy storage, as well as EVs. We've been definitely in some trusted advisory positions where we're providing solutions at the C-suite level, the senior executive level. And our work really is about a full project cycle execution. So I'll just bring you to the agenda now for this webinar. So we have both Felix Morin and Declan O'Lean, who's going to be presenting to you information on EV market trends and where Canada's at. And we'll also be providing information on the EVI, which is the EV Intelligence Database, and that's got information on both electric vehicles and electric construction equipment. And then we'll provide some closing remarks and take some Q&A. I drive an EV, and I've been driving an EV for about 2.5 years, since the day the COVID was announced in Canada, in Alberta, and I've been totally enjoying it, loving it. This year I will need to rent a vehicle, which will be interesting because I'll have to drive an ICE vehicle, just from a lack of availability of rental cars that are EVs. So it'll be interesting to drive an ICE vehicle again. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to Felix and Declan, who are going to walk you through our agenda.
Thank you very much, Paula, for that great introduction. To start off, our first question here is, where is your mission of vehicles headed, right? Because we might know where they're from, we might know where they're at now, but where are they headed? So we'll start talking about the industry trends, some analyses that we've done, as well as our general thoughts on the EV industry. So start with the forecast. As you can see, the compound annual growth rate for the EV industry has been growing exponentially for the past couple of years and is expected to continue that. As in 2020, EV market was valued at 163 billion. In 2030, it's expected to quadruple and hit almost 800 billion. The CAGR, compound annual growth rate, for EVs is 18.2% compared to an internal combustion engine market is 3.3%. And even though the COVID-19 had a very heavy hit on not just the automotive industry, but the world in general, EVs, they're still on the rise with that. Now, one of the biggest driving factors is the GHG emissions. So the stats here you can see on the right are the greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector from the US. It's worth noting that the US and Canada aren't significantly different. It's 1 or 2%. But transportation makes up 27%. Now, of course, that makes up not all transportation, not just automobiles, planes, trains as well, those sorts of things. But automobiles do make up a very significant portion of that. And so by taking some of the internal combustion engines off of the road, we can help produce lower greenhouse gases and help produce a more sustainable environment. Transitioning to a ZEV fleet could reduce 70% of our urban emissions, and not to mention the lower, despite the higher upfront investment, the lower maintenance, the lower fuel cost makes it a better long-term investment for ZEVs.
Looking at how the government of Canada is involved in the EV market and how they're supporting electric vehicle adoption. So sort of moving left to right, you see a timeline here of policies and regulations put in place. So 2016, this Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, this was sort of a start for Canada saying, we want to get involved. We want people to know we're getting involved. And they said they were going to develop a strategy by 2018. So 2019 came around a year late, but they developed sales targets and I guess a motto of EV 30 at 30. However, they realized over the course of 3 years that they were well above these projected targets. So they did revise them recently, I believe in March, and we're now looking at 100% sales target by 2035. So almost 10 years from now, and that's very large advancement for the government and going to definitely drive the market forward. Moving forward into 2020, there was a strengthened climate plan by the government, and one of the 5 pillars talked about needing cleaner modes of transportation and zero-emission vehicles on the road. So just acknowledging how important they are to reaching net zero by 2050 for Canada. And as well, we look at some of their monetary incentives for both consumers and corporations. We see on the very right here, they have the Zero-Emission Vehicles program. So this is for all sorts of zero-emission vehicles. And then below that, they have the infrastructure program. So this is for setting up charging infrastructure, which is just as important as electric vehicles here. And as well, there's the Clean Fuel Standard, which is fairly new, and that is sort of driving the ZEV market and creating a larger market for low carbon fuels. So moving forward, just a bit more into depth into the zero emission vehicle program. So this is Canada's largest incentive currently for electric vehicles. As we see on the left, they invested initially 587 million, which came up to 1.7 billion extension into 2025. So they've from just 2019 to 2020, 2.7 million tons of GHG over vehicle lifetime has been saved. So that's substantial numbers, and showing the money they put into this, it really shows the devotion the Canadian government has to both developing the ZEV market and ensuring people are invested in a zero emission future. So it's great to see all the time and effort the government has put into these policies. As well as, so although the IZEV is more consumer focused, there is tax write-off incentives for businesses. So the budget 2019 proposed 100% write-off, and this still continues throughout next year, with it slowly easing away until 2027. So this just shows now is a better time than ever to invest in zero emission vehicles for either company or consumer, as there are these great incentive programs out there to aid the purchasing these vehicles. As we know, they can be expensive, but over the long run, the emissions reductions and the lower fuel cost is definitely a large plus. So alongside the federal government, there are a lot of provincial governments who are working on incentives and have initiatives in place. So we'll take a look at the map of Canada here to sort of get a better idea of what these initiatives entail. So the only provinces currently without initiatives or programs are New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Alberta, Nunavut, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. The Ontario program, they did have a great program proposed, trying to accentuate how involved governments are in driving this forward and how much they believe in a zero emission future on the road. So once again, taking a deeper dive into some of these regulations, we see there's a lot of internal sales targets aside from the 2035 100% sales target overall. So in BC here, they've had this Clean BC Climate Action Plan, and this 2035 100% sales target has been set out for, I think, 5 years now. So this was way ahead of the federal government, and as well, they have two regulations in place to help further drive the EV market. Quebec, with similar measures, they want an overall target of 1.5 million EVs by 2030, which is a very substantial number and very ambitious of the province. So just once again showing how invested people are in a ZEV future and how big of a deal this transition truly is. So taking a look even at the smaller provinces in Canada, they're trying to make a difference. I know New Brunswick doesn't even have a population over 800,000 people, and they still have a plan to drive a zero emissions future. So we see that they did have a certain target for number of EVs on the road, and they did not reach their 2020 target as they only had 473 EVs on the road. So this does show that sometimes these policies don't actually come to fruition and can fall short, but they are in place, and it does show that these provinces are making an effort, as we see in Yukon, one of the farthest north places in Canada. We see they do have a plan for a ZEV future with 30% by 2030. So they do have regulations in place as well, with the Clean Energy Act soon to come and the climate change strategy supporting ZEV adoption. So looking at these policies and incentives as a whole, we see they do have structured framework in place to grow the ZEV market and support it, as it is still a fairly new market. However, one thing that's important to note is that they are lacking attention towards increasing EV supply. So for parts, as we note in our EV intelligence database through our production numbers, a lot of companies are struggling right now with finding battery suppliers, metal especially as well, for these vehicles, which is making consumers wait a long time for the vehicles. So this is something the government of Canada could potentially work on. As we see in the European Union, they do have an automotive battery industry to help curb the supply chain shortages. And so that'd be something Canada could definitely work on to further market growth. However, so yeah, once these monetary programs end, most of which ending by 2027, the government will likely need to be putting in regulations to further ZEV adoption, as they've already been spending billions of dollars on this market. So regardless of the shortcomings of some of these incentives and policies, as we've seen in the previous slides, federal and provincial governments are working together and have a definitive plan to help cut down GHGs from transportation.
All right, so now we'll get into kind of the meat of this presentation. Let's get into the actual database, the actual intelligence, what you're all here for. First of all, why are we doing this? So main reason, convenience, right? We want to have all this information in one place available for you and your company. This allows for comparison between different ZEVs, different PHEVs, stuff like that, for anyone that's interested in getting into a fleet decarbonization. For any company or person that's interested in getting into fleet decarbonization, basically, our EVI will be, it's an informative tool to help you guys in your path towards a more sustainable and a more GHG-free company, GHG-free environment, GHG-free workplace. So what's in this EVI? So we have every all-electric hybrid and hydrogen model currently available in Canada. We have a few models that will be available within the next 1 to 2 years that have already been announced. Models like the Cybertruck, like the Roadster, just to name a few. For each of these vehicles, we have like everything that you'd expect: the model year, the vehicle type, batteries, range, cargo space, torque, horsepower, safety ratings, everything that you could possibly want. And then for a little bit of extra fun, we added in some top speed and 0 to 100 acceleration time, just because why not as well. Yeah, so talking about our key feature and benefits, like I said, this includes over 90 models. Keep in mind we separate each vehicle trim as a different model. As you can see on the slide, for example, the Model 3 has 3 different trims. So we have that separated out because they're sold as 3 different cars essentially. Yeah, 30 specifications for each vehicle, making this your go-to place for all the information you need on ZEVs. And then, yeah, we're just looking to inform you on ZEV purchasing and for your fleet decarbonization. So short little thing about our statistics. The mean range was 412 kilometers, which is pretty good, I'd say. The mean battery efficiency was 0.25 kilowatt hours per kilometer. We are expecting that to go down over the next few years as battery technology develops. And a mean level 3 or super fast charger capacity of 185 kilowatts, which is quite interesting considering that the level 3 that DC chargers can range anywhere from 50 to 350 kilowatts. So we found that quite interesting. So now our services. So we're going to be updating this database quarterly based on sales, market trends, and new technologies. Just to make sure, right, that you're up to date, because this is a very fast-moving industry and a very fast-moving. You need to make sure that you're on top of it. So if you decide to purchase this database, you'll have full access to the quarterly database, and then this database will be updated regularly, as well as Solas itself offers in-depth strategies and guides on how to transition into a fleet decarbonization, which you'll already be in contact with us. So as for pricing, this database is $3,000 Canadian for the third quarter 2022 version. Exactly what you're purchasing, since you're spending this amount of money, is you'll have a complete copy of our database in an Excel sheet, all nicely formatted for you, a PDF that myself and Felix have put together, describing the full analytics of the quarter EV industry trends, technologies, as well as any significant news regarding new cars, new technologies, stuff like that, as well as if you have any questions regarding the database, regarding our PDF, regarding what our thoughts are on this really emerging industry, you'll have a question period for us if you need. So purchasing this database is available on our website, and there's a QR code on the screen right now. If you want to contact us, if you have any more questions regarding the EV database after this webinar, it's also on our website, which the QR code will take you to. So if you have any really general questions, go to our website. That should answer you. And then finally, what are our fleet decarbonization advisory services from Solas specifically? So as you can see here, we offer expert advisory services, project development and management, as well as zero-emission fleet optimization and transitional services. So basically, if you're looking to decarbonize your fleet, make it more environmentally friendly, we are your go-to person to look at how to do that. We can help you straight from your processes almost through to purchasing of the vehicles, all of that planning. That is where we can help you with.
Okay, so we've looked a bit at electric vehicles, but now we want to take a bit of a dive into sort of an unknown and very new market with electric construction machinery. A lot of companies currently making internal combustion engine construction machinery are investing billions of dollars into electric construction programs. I know Volvo announced 2 months ago that they're investing $1.2 billion in their electric machinery fleet. So obviously this is going to create large news in the industry as to what's exactly going on. So one of the large things of why add electric machinery to your construction fleet. So first off, electric machines are outstandingly more quiet than internal combustion engine machinery. So this not only helps protect the ears and safety of construction workers, but especially in Canada with our very cold winters and long winters, this helps extend the construction season as you're allowed to work longer throughout the days, avoiding noise bylaws by municipalities or provincial noise laws. And this as well decreases downtime for mere electric machinery equipment and providing more fleet security, as these electric machines do not require as much maintenance as internal combustion engines. And there's less moving parts essentially within these machines. So this ensures maintenance costs are down, maintenance times are down, and you're able to work longer construction periods, making it all around just a better investment. So what we have is an electric construction machinery database. So similar to our electric vehicle intelligence database, this one is a bit different as we have a variety of different construction machinery. So track loaders, bucket trucks, cement mixers, sort of a lot of things you'd see on a construction site. However, the specifications are a bit different here, as a lot of these machines require machine specific characteristics. So for dump trucks, let's say, they do have like the load capacity and bucket size, where this wouldn't matter as much for, say, a crane. But it's very interesting to sort of compare the two and see their battery range, life, and capacity, and would be a great tool not only if you're looking for fleet decarbonization in construction, but as well just to see sort of where the market's at, what technology is available right now, and sort of just an informative tool as well. So looking here at potential services we're willing to provide with this construction matrix is similar to the electric vehicle intelligence database. So we give quarterly updates regarding any sort of advancements or anything new in the industry. This is a very fast-paced industry similar to electric vehicles. So it's important to stay up to date on what's going on and where we are with technology and market trends, values. And as well, we will be offering a similar form to the electric vehicle database, but an Excel spreadsheet with sort of every single electric construction machine available in Canada currently, and any prototypes that are being worked on by companies. I know there are 2 companies working on their first cement trucks, which is very interesting to see an electric cement truck. As well as these, we're also willing to provide, as Declan was emphasizing earlier, our regular fleet advisory services that Solas has been providing for years, with several projects of experience behind that. So looking at this presentation at a whole, we want to make it very clear that people truly care about a company's efforts to reduce their emissions. As we see in the graph on the right here, this is the comparison between products and companies that have renewable energy goals or are working towards a sustainable future. So first off, we see recycled steel has a very, very large compound annual growth rate compared to steel long products. And just looking at sort of different industries and how this idea of a sustainable future and goals to become sustainable affects someone's, I guess, a consumer's decision. So we want to emphasize that fleet decarbonization is a strategy that is looked upon very well by consumers and people within the industry. So with Canada's goal to be net zero by 2050. Fleet decarbonization is something that will definitely help us reach this goal. And we're hoping that this EV intelligence tool is a way that can help guide companies towards zero emission future. But once again, just want to emphasize how our electric vehicle database provides convenience for companies. So to make this change towards a sustainable future less intimidating, I want to say, I know a lot of times it can be a lot of work trying to develop plans for the future, especially when we have no clue what's going to happen. But yeah, it's definitely a tool that can help everyone, and I hope you were able to see that in this presentation and got a great idea of where the zero emission vehicle market is headed, where it's at now, and sort of where Solas plays in between there and where we can help in the future. So thank you.
What do you think is the best approach to even for organizations to consider using EVs? Like, should they look to incorporate one or two, or should they look at their entire fleet at one time? What are your thoughts overall?
That's a great question. Sort of considering, it honestly depends on your fleet size, I'd say, but definitely sectioning, sort of creating categories. So not looking at the fleet as a whole, but splitting it up into components, I'd say, as to different types of vehicles and truly like what your goals are, what you're using these vehicles for, essentially. So if you have, say, 10 vehicles and 5 are used as panel vans for long distance transport, and then you have 5 sort of smaller vehicles used for daily commute or anything within the city, I think you have to look at those as 2 different scenarios. And also just keep in mind that you don't have to go full to zero emission vehicles. There's ways to reduce your GHG emissions without having to purchase new vehicles. So this includes considering the routes you take. So this can definitely impact your GHG emissions as well. So it's about considering more than just purchasing new vehicles, but as well strategizing towards, okay, how long are my current vehicles going to last? Is there anything I can do currently to sort of reduce my emissions? And obviously, so zero emission vehicles are great, but sometimes companies do not have the, I guess, capital to invest in a bunch of vehicles at the same time. So it's definitely something you have to take step by step and sort of, yeah, divide into small chunks, I'd say.
Okay, I've got a question for Declan here.
I have one thing
Okay.
to add on to that, actually. If you're not sure what to do about your fleet decarbonization and your path to that, feel free to contact us and we will figure that out for you. So.
Okay, I've got a question for Declan then. I know that you definitely had quite a bit of fun putting this together, and there are some vehicles on there that may not be for the average bear. So Declan, what's the most fun vehicle you've got in the database?
Interesting question. That's a tough one. I'd say that's currently out right now. The most interesting one, I'd say, probably the Ford F-150 electric actually is quite interesting how it compares to the ICE vehicle. As for what could be out in the future, obviously the Tesla Roadster looks to be essentially ahead of its time, and so that one's obviously going to be very, very cool when it comes onto the market. So I'd say those two.
Okay, and we have a question coming in through here. It's thanks for the presentation. Have you seen any company use their fleet as grid-tied supply of power instead of load? Are fleets being used as distributed resource? And if so, How did the economics look so far, if no? Oh, that's a pretty dense question.
But there are, it's more in the US right now, as the Canada's charging infrastructure isn't quite as developed as the US, but there are companies. So one of the vehicles in our database is called Bright Drop Zevo, and it is it's one of the most advanced panel vans and delivery vans that's on the market right now currently. It is available in Canada as well, which is why we included it, but can get up to 600 kilometers in range for the larger vehicle, which is quite a substantial and impressive specification. But so I know Walmart, Amazon, and a delivery company, FedEx, sorry. So they have a bunch of these vehicles, and they actually, for their charging stations, because this does draw a lot of power and electricity from the grid, they do have sort of microgrids essentially. So they do have, I know Budget has a solar farm that does power an entire charging station for these vehicles. So sort of, if that kind of answers your question, there is development in that area right now, and looking not only on charging like infrastructure for these vehicles, but how this affects the grid. As I mean, charging 100 vehicles at once is obviously going to be a large load. So a lot of companies are working right now to tackle this and optimize charging. And one of these ways is through a microgrid and not actually connecting to the grid itself.
And just to talk about V2G, so it's vehicle to grid. So there are, in terms of the visioning of grid of the future, where vehicles can be used as disaggregated energy storage that's then used to help with grid modernization and essentially reduce any kind of constraints on the grid. This is early days for Canada. I would say some of the most advanced thinking of it is probably on the East Coast, Nova Scotia, with regard to V2G. If you look at the economics of these, you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. The interesting thing, so in my neighborhood, I have, well, not I, but there are 3 Teslas within a block and a half. And I know that, so I have a level 2 charger, so not a fast charging, DC fast charging, but a level 2 at 240 volts. And I know that some of my friends who work in the distribution company at NMAX are concerned about multiple parties doing charging at the same time. And right now, the city of Calgary, or sorry, NMAX is actually doing a study on essentially vehicles and smart charging, of watching the behavior of people, and are they doing it, is everybody coming home at the same time at the end of the day and plugging in, or could they be enticed to plug in and do the charge overnight? I know on the Tesla app you can switch it to have off-peak charging. Here we go. So Alex has got a commentary back. He says no V2G capability for Tesla vehicles that he's aware of. Interesting. So the Tesla vehicles are probably the #1 in sales. They've surpassed just about every other vehicle model. So that is interesting about no V2G capability for Tesla. Very, very interesting. Thanks, Alex. I'm just going to read Joseph's question here. Thanks for the answer. I imagine the work hours for fleets are relatively rigid and time of use and ancillary services may be valuable. Absolutely. I do know of some organizations in the US where they have a headquarters that is completely off grid. Everybody drives an EV. And so the question is, how does everybody charge at the same time? Is there a priority in terms of, hey, I really need this right now? Or is there a way that there is, so that everybody can charge around the same time, or shared charging, or do senior executives get priority on charging their vehicles? So they've actually developed an app in order to essentially do some smart charging, so that everybody can charge, but they're not all charging at the same time and overriding their microgrid capability. So we've got a few more questions coming in. Joad, I know that name. Hello, Joad. when building the business case and strategy for a greener EV fleet for municipal government that has no GHG emission reduction targets, what are the other overall benefits, quantifiable or not, that you would put forward to municipal leaders beyond lower life cycle costs and maintenance requirements and lower noise levels, as you mentioned in your presentation? That's a really good question, Joad. One of the things that we've identified is the significantly reduced maintenance costs, as well as the significantly reduced fuel costs. So these are much easier on an EV vehicle. On my EV vehicle, I've had tires changed, and I filled up the washer fluid, but otherwise you don't have that quarterly requirement or to change the oil, etc. I still have maintenance reviews on it. They'll actually come to my home, which is amazing. But I think for municipality, you need to look at the overall life cycle costs or the total cost of ownership. You need to look at maintenance requirements, the number of people involved in maintenance, how much percentage of your fleet is actually out there being useful versus being in for maintenance, as well as the overall fuel cost. So hopefully, Joad, that was helpful for you on that one. And Alex, you've got a question coming up. Yeah, I'd be curious about Solas' opinion on V2G impact on battery longevity and increasing cycling. Okay, let me take that one first. Yeah, I was invited to be part of the V2G pilot. And for my own opinion is now you're going to use my battery that I've paid a pretty penny for and go up and down at your will, and I'm not necessarily going to be compensated with regard to the cycle life of my battery. So I think the whole V2G has to be thought about in terms of compensation or warranty impact for the vehicle owner. Also interested in the opinion on how access to charging infrastructure should weigh into the organization's decision when selecting EVs. Yeah, we have dealt with that, Alex, for some organizations. Part of it is, for example, the St. Albert fleet for buses. They have 6 electric buses, and part of the issues that they are hitting is that they have a maximum capacity. They have a fleet of 60 buses, but they only have 6 or 7 EV or electric buses. And what's limiting them is how much they can actually charge at. So they can have only a few buses charge at any one time. So that'll be interesting. Interesting to see how capacity and load and power flow changes will change over time. The other interesting thing about EVs is that the charging at night will then change as a profile. Where right now we have loads that are at dinner time, and we have super peaks, or peaks and super peaks, and right now that is a current load profile. But with distributed generation of solar during the day, and then with charging at nighttime, we're going to start to have a different load profile, which I think can take advantage of the existing infrastructure. So it's really about when do you schedule your charging. The other thing that we have looked at is the number of charging stations per vehicle, or vehicles per charging station. It's early days yet, and so the number can range from 6 to 30 with regard to vehicles per charging station in terms of publicly available. And so we'll see where that goes. But right now it's in great flux with regard to if there's a bulge of infrastructure for charging stations versus a fleet purchase electric. And what we've encouraged in the people to do in the fleet decarbonization is really for them to look at their capacity for charging on site, look at their routes to see if there is publicly available charging that they could do. Yeah, and Alex, great to have you here as an interested individual and not representing Tesla. What's your research found across Canada with respect to energy equity and equality? Often EV communities are more affluent, and the associated electrical infrastructure is upgraded sooner to support the added EV load profile, possibly preventing access to other communities. That is a very interesting question. So a lot of EVs did come out as more on the luxury end of vehicles. What we found in jurisdictions such as California and Ontario and British Columbia is that it's not necessarily the luxury end vehicles that are prolific, that it's the smaller vehicles that are more for within the city, smaller range, that were generally built out better. I think the Canadian infrastructure for distributed gen is at a very different place than the US, and historically our grids have had more investment in them sooner, where they're trying to essentially modernize the grid to allow for distributed gen, etc. I think the range of EVs and the availability of secondhand EVs will determine the price point and who is actually in the EV market. I know that within Calgary there is a group called Go Electric. They're on 17th Avenue, and they specialize in secondhand EVs that are available. In terms of charging, I mean, this can be done as a trickle charger where you plug it in. It's just going to take you longer time. Sometimes when I've only had access to a level 1 charger, it just means I'm there longer for charging, and it just means I need to do more planning. So some EVs, you can get them secondhand for 14K or 12K or 16K. A lot of them have had rebates from California or Ontario from historical bases, and so they are more and more available. But I agree that initially a lot of these were more for affluent or luxury vehicles. Joad, you've got a question there. For vehicle fleets, does the EVI database include recommendation or options regarding charging management systems to reduce demand charges? We have done some work where we've mapped the entire value chain of the EV infrastructure to identify just the size of the value chain, the current suppliers in each one of those parts of the value chain for EV infrastructure. So we do have that identified, and we do have a listing, but it's not within that database. But Joad, if you reach out to us, we'd be happy to support your efforts. Okay, we'll be doing another update in the fall, and you guys can have the QR code for if you're interested in acquiring the database.